Picture this: a grand ballroom awash in glittering chandeliers, tuxedos and diamonds. A pregnant woman, trying her best to wear a brave smile, stands at the corner of the room as whispers swirl around her like a ravenous tide. Suddenly the mistress arrives, slim, stunning, radiating confidence, and zeroes in on her target. She offers a snide remark loud enough for all to hear, mocking the wife's blossoming belly and precarious situation. Gasps fill the air. Everyone expects the millionaire husband to defend his wife. Instead, silence reigns. Until the pregnant wife makes a move no one saw coming. In the blink of an eye, the entire room will witness one of the most shocking public downfalls anyone has ever seen. 4 years before that electrifying charity gala, the wealthy entrepreneur Joseph Joe Chadwick, heir to the Chadwick real estate empire, married Charlotte Rivers in an exclusive ceremony at St. Ignatius Church in New York City. Joe, known for his quiet demeanor and regal taste, took over the reins of Chadwick Realty upon his father's passing. Charlotte, once a rising interior designer from Boston, was swept up into a fairy tale romance when she accepted Joe's proposal. The wedding, rumored to have cost nearly $2 million, was the talk of the season. No expense was spared. The bride's gown was custom-made in Paris. The guest list included famed personalities like Elon Musk, Oprah Winfrey, and Bernard Arnault. All acquaintances of Joe's late father, and the media coverage was relentless. Charlotte's hesitant smiles in the wedding photographs were explained away as bridal nerves. Yet a few close friends worried something might not be quite right. After all, Charlotte had given up her bustling design career in Boston to relocate to the high-pressure world of Manhattan society in order to stand by Joe's side. In private, they weren't the picture-perfect couple that society magazines made them out to be. Joe was always busy. Work followed him home, phone calls into the late hours, weekend meetings, constant travel. There were also rumors that behind his polished veneer, he was controlling, sometimes cold, and seldom showed the warmth one might expect in a loving marriage. But from the outside, they looked unstoppable. With Charlotte's knack for style and Joe's business acumen, they quickly became the philanthropic it couple for events, dinners, and fundraisers. Their story was that of a modern fairy tale, but every fairy tale has its hidden shadows. After they were married, Charlotte was immediately introduced into Joe's philanthropic network. The Chadwick name had funded hospitals, scholarship programs, and art museums for over half a century. Joseph's father, the late Warren Chadwick, had built not just a real estate empire, but also a reputation for giving back. It was his father's legacy that Joe was determined to uphold more to honor him than for genuine altruism, or so Charlotte suspected. Over time, these posh charity galas and black tie events began to take a toll on Charlotte. She was expected to mingle flawlessly, to host dinner parties, to decorate lavish penthouses for donor gatherings, sometimes with less than a week's notice. If anything went awry, Joe's disapproval was palpable. He never yelled or cursed. Instead, a cold glare or a silent drive home would leave Charlotte feeling like she was walking on eggshells. Despite her reservations, Charlotte quietly endured the demands. Part of her believed that once the frantic pace of their new life settled, Joe would open his heart to her. She had, after all, married him out of a combination of love, admiration, and the desire to make him proud. Behind closed doors, Joe occasionally showed tenderness, praising her event coordination, patting her on the shoulder for a job well done, or gifting her with an elegant necklace after a successful fundraiser. These moments of warmth were fleeting, but enough to keep Charlotte hopeful. It was at one such fundraiser, an event supporting foster care initiatives in Manhattan, that Charlotte first met Georgina Frost, an up-and-coming socialite with a trust fund rumored to hail from a flamboyant Texas oil dynasty. Georgina was tall, raven-haired, and wore sky-high stilettos that seemed more appropriate for a runway than a philanthropic soiree. She caught Joe's eye from across the room. Initially, Charlotte thought nothing of it. Joe was a people person and had to maintain pleasantries with big donors or their heirs. But over time, small rumors began to swirl. Friends in Charlotte's circle mentioned seeing Joe and Georgina in the same corner of the same exclusive lounge on multiple occasions once without Charlotte. The staff at the Chadwick Foundation claimed that Georgina had become an active volunteer, working late nights at the office, often coinciding with Joe's schedule. Charlotte tried to quell her suspicions, reminding herself that Georgina was involved in philanthropic endeavors, much like everyone else in that circle. But the body language at dinners, Georgina leaning just a little too close to Joe, her laughter a bit too loud at Joe's jokes, made Charlotte's blood run cold. She confided in a single close friend, Naomi Jenkins, who had known Charlotte since college. Naomi was a lawyer who had seen enough marital disputes to sense red flags from a mile away. "Don't ignore your instincts," Naomi warned over an afternoon tea in Charlotte's penthouse. "If he's stepping out, you need evidence. You need to be prepared." Charlotte resisted refusing to believe it could be that dire. She still wanted to trust her husband, and so ignoring the twinges of doubt, she put on a smile at each event, even if it grew more and more forced each time Georgina flitted into the room. Charlotte's world tilted on its axis one crisp autumn morning when she discovered she was pregnant. The morning sickness, the exhaustion, she chalked it up to stress from event planning until a quick pharmacy test changed her life. After a second test confirmed it, she decided to announce the news to Joe in a special way. She arranged candles and a small display of baby shoes in their living room, hoping to catch him in a rare moment of repose. Joe's reaction was subdued. He offered a polite smile, said something about surprising timing, and then asked if they should visit the doctor right away. Charlotte felt her heart sink. She had expected an embrace, tears of joy, or at least a kiss. Instead, she received logistical questions, as if he were preparing for a business merger instead of fatherhood. Still, Charlotte's joy was undiminished. She vowed to keep a positive spirit, hoping the baby would bridge the emotional gap forming between them. Maybe she thought fatherhood would awaken in Joe the warmth he rarely displayed. True to form, Joe did schedule all the necessary doctor's appointments. He accompanied Charlotte, asked questions about vitamins and her diet, and even insisted on hiring a private chef to ensure she got the right nutrients. It appeared caring on the surface, but Charlotte couldn't shake the feeling that it was all too methodical, like ticking items off a checklist. He rarely asked how she felt about the changes in her body, her hopes, or her fears. Late one evening, Charlotte was in bed, reading pregnancy articles on her tablet, when she heard Joe's voice drift in from the hallway. He was on the phone. She strained her ears. "Don't worry," he said in a hushed tone. "We'll talk tomorrow in the office." The voice he used was soft, almost affectionate. Though he didn't mention a name, Charlotte's heart pounded with dread. She chose not to confront him. An inner voice told her the truth would come out on its own. Sometimes illusions are easier to maintain than a painful reality. It was around Charlotte's second trimester when Georgina's presence became impossible to ignore. She was everywhere in the tabloids, on social media, often photographed attending society events without Charlotte in sight. A mutual acquaintance mentioned that Georgina was named a special advisor to the Chadwick Foundation's new initiative on sustainable housing. Charlotte had never heard of such a role. More suspiciously, Georgina and Joe were spotted outside a boutique hotel just having coffee, according to the gossip columns. The strain of it all caused Charlotte's eyes to well with tears at unpredictable moments. Still, she clung to a semblance of dignity and told herself Georgina was just another social climber who latched on to wealthy men for attention. Joe assured Charlotte that Georgina's father, Randolph Frost, was a significant donor, and Georgina's input was part of a broader philanthropic partnership. Charlotte, desperate to maintain her marriage and protect her unborn child, tried to believe him, but that gnawing sense of betrayal never left her. Throughout her pregnancy, Charlotte began noticing subtle changes in Joe. He started coming home even later, often with vague excuses. Weekend getaways or dinners that he claimed were work-related suddenly multiplied. Meanwhile, Charlotte was left feeling isolated, filling her time with prenatal yoga reading about baby care and meticulously designing the nursery in their sprawling penthouse. On her own, Charlotte decided to investigate. She rummaged through Joe's study one afternoon and found a receipt for an expensive bracelet from Tiffany & Co., dated around Valentine's Day. She never received any such gift. Later, she discovered a key card for a suite at the Park Hyatt. Panic fluttered in her chest as she realized the suite's date correlated with one of Joe's supposed business conferences. Grief-stricken and uncertain, Charlotte confronted him that evening. Joe looked at her calmly and asserted it was a misunderstanding. The bracelet had been for a loyal donor, an older woman he was trying to impress for a major foundation grant. The suite, he claimed, was for a visiting business associate. Charlotte knew the explanation was flimsy, but she lacked proof to refute him outright. Weary and heartbroken, Charlotte turned again to her old friend Naomi for counsel. They met in Naomi's law office away from prying eyes and the gilded walls of the Chadwick penthouse. Naomi was blunt. "You need to protect yourself and your child. If he's cheating, you need a contingency plan." Naomi laid out a scenario in which Charlotte would gather solid evidence of Joe's affair. If Charlotte could prove adultery, she would have a stronger position in any potential divorce settlement, especially crucial if she wanted to secure her child's future. But Charlotte balked at the idea of a divorce. "I'm pregnant," she said, tears brimming. "I can't just give up." Naomi took her hand. "Sometimes letting go is the strongest thing you can do," she said. "Just be prepared." A few weeks later, Charlotte received a phone call from an unfamiliar number. A woman's voice, trembling, identified herself as Beverly Chen, an administrative assistant at the Chadwick Foundation. Beverly was hesitant to reveal anything at first, but she insisted she had vital information for Charlotte. They agreed to meet in a discreet cafe on the Lower East Side, far from the usual upscale Manhattan spots. Over a cup of chamomile tea, Beverly confessed she'd seen suspicious emails between Joe and Georgina, filled with personal sentiments and allusions to weekends away. She had overheard phone calls where Georgina referred to Charlotte as the clueless wife, and most nauseatingly, Georgina would frequently say, "I can't wait until the baby is born, so we can ship it off to a nanny and have our fun." Beverly's eyes brimmed with tears, as if she couldn't bear to keep the secret any longer. "I know what it's like to be ignored," Beverly whispered. "I couldn't watch you suffer without at least telling you the truth." Charlotte clutched her teacup, heart pounding with a mix of fury and heartbreak. This was no longer speculation. Joe was having an affair, and Georgina was mocking Charlotte, even ridiculing her unborn child. Armed with Beverly's revelations, Charlotte felt her resolve harden like steel. She was not the naive interior designer from Boston anymore, nor was she the docile wife who blindly followed her husband to every social event. She was a mother determined to protect her child. Charlotte decided to hire a private investigator, a recommendation that Naomi had made months ago. The investigator, a composed woman named Ellen Price, specialized in high-profile cases with absolute discretion. Within days, Ellen confirmed what Charlotte already suspected. Joe and Georgina were renting a lavish condominium on the outskirts of Soho for their clandestine meetings. Ellen provided dates, times, photographs, and even recorded phone calls, enough evidence to shatter Charlotte's heart into 1,000 jagged pieces. But amidst the tears, Charlotte felt a strange sense of liberation. She no longer had to pretend. She had facts and the means to protect herself and her unborn child. The next step was to figure out how and when to confront Joe. More importantly, she had to do it in a way that would leave no room for him to manipulate her or tarnish her reputation. She needed to do it publicly, where Joe's carefully curated persona would work against him. As fate would have it, the Chadwick Foundation's annual holiday charity gala was just weeks away. This event was always a star-studded affair, with guests from the upper echelons of business, politics, and entertainment. The press coverage was immense. Cameras rolled from the moment guests stepped out of their limousines onto the red carpet. Charlotte typically dreaded such gatherings, but this year she saw it as an opportunity. She reached out to Naomi and quietly set a plan in motion. If Joe was going to flaunt his mistress in public, even if only through subtle gestures, then Charlotte would ensure the entire world saw the truth. And if Georgina dared mock her at this event, pregnant belly, and all, Charlotte wanted the power to strike back in the most controlled, strategic way possible. Over the next few days, Charlotte worked tirelessly behind the scenes. She arranged with Naomi's legal firm to have the divorce papers finalized, citing Joe's affair as the grounds. She prepared a separate envelope containing the damning evidence, photographs, transcripts, receipts, all of it. The crowning detail was the place and manner in which Joe would be served under the brightest spotlight of them all. On the night of the holiday charity gala, the ballroom of the Waldorf Grand was transformed into a winter wonderland. Glittering icicle lights hung from the ceiling, elegant ice sculptures adorned the reception area, and white floral arrangements lined the tables. Guests arrived in tuxedos and evening gowns, smiling for the paparazzi. Charlotte, now nearly 6 months pregnant, wore a custom midnight blue dress that accentuated her growing belly with dignified elegance. She arrived alone. Meanwhile, Joe arrived in a separate limousine with Georgina. Though they did not walk the red carpet together, Joe was still cautious. The insiders knew they were a couple. Georgina wore a gleaming silver gown, cut low at the back, turning heads with each step. If there was any doubt about her sense of triumph, it was erased by the smug smile she gave to the cameras, as if relishing her moment in the limelight. Charlotte remained composed, greeting old acquaintances and donors with practiced poise. She could feel Georgina's eyes on her from across the ballroom, but she refused to acknowledge it. She had a mission, and the night had only just begun. As the evening's program commenced, Joe went on stage to deliver a welcome speech on behalf of the Chadwick Foundation. He thanked the donors, praised the volunteers, and announced a new expansion project for affordable housing. No doubt something Georgina had a hand in orchestrating. He showed his usual calm confidence, drawing polite applause from the crowd. The tension in the air was palpable. Charlotte sat at a front table, her shoulders back, chin high. Georgina, unabashed, positioned herself just 2 seats away from Charlotte. During a brief intermission, Georgina sauntered over, a glass of champagne in hand. Lowering her voice so only Charlotte could hear, she sneered, You really shouldn't be drinking anything but water in your condition, dear. Or is that baby your only claim to the Chadwick name now? Charlotte's chest tightened, but she remained outwardly calm. I'm perfectly fine, she replied softly. And so is my child. Georgina gave a dismissive laugh. We'll see how long that lasts. With that, she strode away, leaving Charlotte seething. But Charlotte wouldn't rise to the bait. She had bigger plans. The show truly started when Georgina took the stage as the newly appointed Director of Donor Relations to introduce a musical performance. Flanked by a string quartet, Georgina spoke into the microphone about the Foundation's philanthropic spirit, throwing in pointed jabs at traditional families who face challenges they may not be ready for, drawing side eyes from those who suspected what she was implying. The crowd, a mix of oblivious socialites and keen observers, exchanged murmurs. Some saw through Georgina's facade. Others thought she was merely alluding to general philanthropic issues. But for Charlotte, each word felt like a knife. Her cheeks burned, her heart raced. She could see Joe on the sidelines, arms crossed, looking vaguely amused. Or was it nervousness? The mistress was mocking the pregnant wife in front of everyone, acting as if she had some moral high ground. Little did Georgina know, Charlotte had one final scene to stage. After Georgina's speech, guests began to mingle again. High-profile donors approached Joe to discuss potential partnerships, while Georgina basked in her 15 minutes of fame. Charlotte's hand drifted to her belly, and she steeled herself for what was coming next. Naomi, seated discreetly at a table near the back, made eye contact with Charlotte and nodded. The moment had arrived. The Master of Ceremonies announced a special segment, a surprise presentation by Charlotte Rivers Chadwick. People applauded politely, curious. Charlotte made her way onto the stage, microphone in hand. Spotlights illuminated her, revealing the slight tremor in her posture, but her voice when she spoke was clear and unwavering. She began by thanking the donors and expressing her gratitude for the philanthropic legacy of the Chadwick family. Her words carried a sincerity that contrasted sharply with Georgina's smug monologue. Then, with a calm that belied the turmoil in her heart, Charlotte took a steady breath. I would like to invite my husband, Joseph Chadwick, on stage for a brief announcement. The crowd clapped, and Joe approached his face carefully, neutral. Georgina stood in the shadows, arms folded, lips pressed into a thin line. She had no idea what was coming. As Joe joined Charlotte under the lights, she gave a poised smile. Joseph, for the past few months, we have supported each other through various philanthropic endeavors. At least that's how it may have appeared. The crowd fell silent, sensing tension. The cameras were rolling, capturing every moment. Charlotte continued. But tonight I must speak a truth that weighs heavily on me. I stand here not just as your wife, but as the mother of your unborn child. And while I believed we were building a future together, it appears there's another story, one that involves betrayal, secrecy, and dishonor. The audience stirred. Some gasped. Some looked at one another, unsure how to react. In the corner, Georgina turned pale, her confidence wavering. Charlotte drew out a manila envelope and held it up. I regret to inform you and all of our esteemed guests that I have no choice but to file for divorce. She handed the envelope to Joe, who stood frozen, shock flickering across his features. Murmurs rippled through the crowd like an impending storm. This envelope contains documented proof of Joseph Chadwick's affair with Georgina Frost, Charlotte declared. At the mention of Georgina's name, The cameras whipped to her direction, capturing her look of horror. There are photographs, receipts, and statements that I'm sure will thoroughly explain why I've reached this decision. A collective gasp filled the ballroom. Joe's jaw clenched. Georgina looked as if she might faint. Only Charlotte stood firm, tears in her eyes, but determination in her voice. "I will not be mocked or humiliated," she concluded. "And I will not allow my child to grow up in a home built on lies. This ends now." Pandemonium erupted. Some onlookers tried to stifle their shock, while others whispered with glee. A few cameras remained trained on Georgina, who rushed forward and grabbed Joe's arm, her face contorted with anger. "You said you would handle this," she hissed loud enough for the nearest microphones to catch. Joe, visibly flustered, attempted to regain composure. "Everyone, please. This is a misunderstanding," he began, but Charlotte turned to him with a fierce gaze. "There is no misunderstanding," she said. "Not when there are hotel receipts, email correspondences, and pictures. If you want to lie, do it in court." Security personnel hovered around the stage, unsure whether to intervene. Joe signaled them to stand down, but Georgina, in a desperate attempt to save face, grabbed the microphone. "This is all slander!" she shrieked, eyes blazing. "You're just a jealous, hormonal woman who can't satisfy." She never finished her sentence. The microphone cut out courtesy of the quick-thinking sound crew, leaving the remainder of her tirade unheard by the public. At that moment, Charlotte felt the baby kick as if lending support from within. She closed her eyes briefly, inhaled the cold air of the ballroom, and slowly descended the stage. The final image captured by the news cameras was of Charlotte holding her belly, walking with unshakable grace, while Joe and Georgina were left on stage in the throes of a very public debacle. By the end of the evening, the gala was overshadowed by one headline: "Pregnant wife publicly serves divorce papers to millionaire Joseph Chadwick." Amid affair allegations. Social media lit up. Tabloids had a field day. Paparazzi swarmed outside the Waldorf Grand, clamoring for a picture or a statement. Charlotte escorted by. Naomi slipped into a waiting car and sped off, leaving the chaos behind her. Inside the limousine, Charlotte trembled. The emotional toll of that public confrontation weighed on her heavily. Naomi rubbed her shoulders. "You did what you had to do. Now let the lawyers handle the rest." Joseph attempted to call Charlotte repeatedly that night, but she ignored his calls. Georgina, too, was apparently sending messages, though Charlotte wouldn't stoop to read them. For the first time in months, Charlotte felt a strange sense of liberation. She was free from the charade, free from the lies. Even though her future was uncertain, she was no longer trapped in a loveless marriage ruled by deceit. By dawn the next day, every major news outlet and gossip website featured Charlotte's dramatic stand at the gala. Hashtags like #Chadwick Scandal and #Mistress Mockery trended on Twitter. In an unexpected turn, the public largely sympathized with Charlotte. People admired her courage, especially given her pregnancy. Some news analysts who once adored Joe as a generous philanthropist slammed him for his duplicity. Georgina's social media accounts were bombarded with negative comments, calling her a home wrecker, and worse, even celebrities weighed in. Talk show host Wendy Williams, never one to hold back, commented, "If you're bold enough to flaunt an affair, be bold enough to handle the fallout." Meanwhile, philanthropic circles quietly distanced themselves from Georgina. Rumors swirled that her father, Randolph Frost, was furious over her reckless behavior, fearing it might tarnish the family name. The morning after, Joe appeared at Charlotte's penthouse, unannounced, demanding to talk. The doorman tried to stop him, but Joe pressed forward. Charlotte, wearing a loose-fitting robe cradling her baby bump, met him in the living room. Naomi was present as well, arms folded, ready to intervene if needed. Joe's eyes were bloodshot, his hair disheveled. "You ambushed me," he spat, voice quivering with rage. "At a charity event in front of everyone. You humiliated me." Charlotte set her jaw. "I told the truth," she replied, voice steady. "You humiliated yourself the moment you took Georgina to bed." He raked a hand through his hair, pacing. "We could have handled this privately. The donors are in an uproar. The board is calling for my resignation." "Consequences of your actions," Charlotte interjected. "I owe you no sympathy." Joe attempted to shift tactics, pleading with her to reconsider. He promised to end the affair, to be a proper father to their child. But each word fell flat. Charlotte stared at him, tears swimming in her eyes, remembering the months of suspicion, the late-night calls, the hateful mockery from Georgina. She shook her head. "I'm done," she said. "If you truly want to be a father, you'll do so under the terms I dictate through my legal counsel." With that final statement, Charlotte walked away, leaving Joe in stunned silence. Naomi followed him to the door, escorting him out. Once he was gone, Charlotte retreated to her bedroom and allowed herself a moment to break down. The tears flowed in torrents. She grieved for the marriage she thought she had, the love she had once believed could grow, and the father her child might never truly know. Yet beneath the heartbreak burned a steadfast determination. Charlotte swore she would protect her baby from any future manipulations. If Joe wanted to be involved, it would be on her terms, not his. And as for Georgina, Charlotte's hopes were that Joe would one day realize the difference between a fleeting affair and real companionship, though Charlotte no longer cared to witness that lesson unfold. Over the next few weeks, Naomi and her team tirelessly negotiated the divorce terms. Joe initially resisted refusing to settle with the full demands Charlotte proposed, particularly her request for sole physical custody. He insisted he wanted equal rights to the child, claiming that the baby was as much his as hers. Charlotte's legal team argued that his unstable behavior and proven infidelity were grounds to limit his parental involvement until he showed genuine responsibility. Meanwhile, Georgina vanished from the social scene. Rumors circulated that her father had cut off her allowance and scolded her for bringing such disgrace to the family name. Some said she was hiding out in Europe, others that she was staying at an upscale clinic in California, dealing with emotional stress. Charlotte paid no attention. Georgina's fate was no longer relevant to her life. The winter months were especially cold that year. The swirling snow outside matched the swirling uncertainties in Charlotte's life. Despite all the turmoil, she found solace in preparing for her baby's arrival. She busied herself with setting up the nursery, folding tiny clothes, researching strollers, and reading parenting books. Each little act reminded her that there was hope, there was joy to be found in the new life forming inside her. She also began returning to her roots in interior design, taking on small projects for close friends. It was a way to reinvigorate her creativity and reclaim a piece of her old self, the Charlotte who had her own aspirations and wasn't defined by the Chadwick name. Occasionally, she would wonder if she had done the right thing by going so public with the divorce. Yet every time doubt crept in, she remembered Georgina's sneer and Joe's cold indifference. The truth needed to be exposed. In a bid to salvage his reputation and the Chadwick Foundation's donor base, Joe scheduled a press conference at the Foundation's headquarters. He read a prepared statement in which he apologized to anyone who was hurt by my personal decisions, and he specifically mentioned regret for his failures as a husband. Publicly, he pledged to continue serving as a board member, but stated he would step back from his day-to-day leadership role, citing personal reasons. The apology garnered mixed reactions. Some lauded him for owning up to his mistake. Others scorned him for not doing so sooner. Charlotte watched a snippet on the morning news. She noted how carefully crafted his words were. Not once did he mention Georgina by name, nor did he address the baby directly. She found it lacking sincerity. But at least the public pressure had forced him to acknowledge wrongdoing, a small victory in Charlotte's eyes. As Charlotte advanced into her 7th month of pregnancy, her emotional states oscillated wildly. She was elated at every kick and movement from her unborn child, yet nights were often sleepless, filled with anxiety about the future. Would she be enough for her baby? Could she provide the love and stability required all on her own? She had resources, yes, but money was never a substitute for emotional support. Sometimes thoughts of Joe haunted her dreams. She recalled the early days of their relationship dinner dates, walks along the Hudson laughter at random jokes. She wondered if she had romanticized their union, or if there had been genuine affection that both of them simply failed to nurture. Even so, she recognized that those fleeting good memories did not excuse the betrayal. The man who had once brought her roses had also shattered her trust. Loneliness became Charlotte's constant companion, so she took Naomi's suggestion and joined a prenatal support group. Meeting once a week, she sat in a circle of expectant mothers who shared their own stories, some unwed, some in rocky marriages, others blissfully happy. Oddly, it comforted her to hear other women's struggles. She realized that heartbreak could strike anyone regardless of social standing. Over cups of herbal tea, she made new friends who reminded her that pregnancy, while challenging, was also a transformative journey. One of them, a soft-spoken musician named Felicity, was also estranged from her partner. The two bonded over their shared fears and hopes, forging a new sisterhood that transcended wealth or status. With every meeting, Charlotte felt her wounds begin to mend, her self-confidence inching back. One evening, as she dozed on the couch, Charlotte heard a knock at the door. Cautiously, she opened it to find Joe standing there, holding a small stuffed bear. She almost closed the door in his face, but curiosity held her in place. "May I come in?" he asked quietly. Against her better judgment, she nodded. He stepped inside, looking around the penthouse, as if it had grown unfamiliar. In a halting voice, he said he wanted to talk about co-parenting, to figure out a schedule and support system that wouldn't stress Charlotte out. Charlotte listened carefully. For the first time, Joe showed genuine concern for the baby's well-being, rather than the optics of the situation. He expressed how he regretted his actions, though he stopped short of fully acknowledging the damage. Still, it was the closest thing to real remorse Charlotte had heard from him. She agreed to let him attend the final ultrasound appointment, but she made it clear that this changed nothing about the divorce proceedings. Joe left after half an hour, leaving the stuffed bear on the coffee table, a small, possibly sincere gesture. At the ultrasound session, Joe joined Charlotte in the exam room. Awkward silence stretched between them until the technician began the scan. The rhythmic thump of the baby's heartbeat filled the room. The screen flickered, revealing the outline of a tiny face. Charlotte felt tears spill onto her cheeks. Joe, too, looked visibly moved, his eyes misting over. For one fragile moment, they were simply two people witnessing the miracle of new life. The swirl of legal battles, infidelity, and heartbreak receded into the background. When the technician handed them the printed ultrasound images, Joe gently touched Charlotte's hand. She didn't pull away. It was a flicker of unity, a reminder that despite everything they shared a child. Leaving the clinic, Joe offered to drive Charlotte home. She hesitated, then agreed. The ride was silent, but not tense. It was as if they both realized this was a pivotal moment. How they handled co-parenting would shape the baby's life forever. In the weeks that followed, Joe's lawyers reached out with revised divorce terms. Joe conceded to a hefty financial settlement and a structured visitation schedule, acknowledging Charlotte's right to full physical custody initially. A joint therapy session was proposed specifically geared toward co-parenting strategies. Although Charlotte was hesitant, Naomi advised her it could be beneficial for setting healthy boundaries. They attended their first session in a discreet therapist's office, far from paparazzi. Emotions ran high. Charlotte vented her sense of betrayal. Joe expressed guilt over letting their marriage deteriorate. While no miracles happened overnight, they began to see each other not just as adversaries in a legal war, but as the mother and father of a soon-to-be-born child who deserved stability and love. On a snowy morning in late March, Charlotte went into labor. The contractions struck like rolling thunder, sending her rushing to the hospital with Naomi by her side. Joe arrived an hour later. Breathless anxiety etched across his features. Despite the tension between them, Charlotte allowed him in the delivery room, knowing that this moment transcended their broken relationship. After a grueling labor, a piercing cry announced the arrival of a baby girl. The medical staff placed the infant in Charlotte's arms. Through tears of exhaustion and joy, Charlotte gazed at her daughter. Tiny fingers grasping the air, eyes tightly shut. Joe stood beside her, wiping tears from his own cheeks, carefully placing a hand on the baby's head. In that instant, the bitterness of the past year melted away, replaced by awe for the life they had created together. While they were no longer husband and wife, they had forged an unbreakable bond as parents. Once news of the baby's birth leaked, tabloids clamored for details. Speculations about the child's name weight and Joe's involvement ran rampant. Charlotte remained tight-lipped. She refused to give interviews, valuing her newborn's privacy above all else. Joe, too, stayed silent, only releasing a brief statement through his lawyers. "We are grateful for a healthy delivery and respectfully request privacy as we focus on our daughter's well-being." Georgina was conspicuously absent from the narrative. No statements, no social media posts. It seemed she had retreated, completely cast out by high society circles that once welcomed her. In a world where reputation meant everything, Georgina had burned too many bridges. Whether she felt remorse or shame, no one could say. As Charlotte recovered in the hospital, Joe visited daily to see the baby. The tension that once choked their every interaction was replaced by a measured civility. They talked about feeding schedules, diaper brands, and doctor appointments. Occasionally, laughter would break through, a soft reminder of simpler times. Charlotte began to realize that while she would always feel the sting of betrayal, the love she had for her daughter overshadowed the pain. She chose to focus on the present, diaper changes, lullabies, and precious quiet moments. Joe, for his part, seemed genuinely committed to fatherhood. It didn't erase his past wrongdoing, but it was a step toward being there for his child. Months passed. Charlotte embraced motherhood with a fierce devotion. She also resumed taking more interior design clients, balancing her time between caring for her daughter, whom she named Isabella, and cultivating her re-emerging career. She moved out of the penthouse, purchasing a cozy townhouse in the West Village. Though smaller, it was entirely her own, a testament to her independence. Friends marveled at how she juggled single motherhood and a busy schedule. Charlotte, though, found a strength within herself she never knew existed. The heartbreak from Joe's affair and the public spectacle of the divorce had forged her into a stronger woman. She cherished the quiet evenings rocking Isabella to sleep, finding in those tender moments a sense of fulfillment she had long craved. On weekends, Joe took Isabella to the park or on short visits to his own residence. The arrangement went smoothly, thanks in large part to the therapy sessions and the clearly defined legal agreement. Charlotte sometimes felt pangs of sadness, seeing Joe cradle Isabella memories of what could have been drifting through her mind. But she resolved to keep the peace for Isabella's sake. Over time, they found a rhythm. While Joe remained somewhat distant emotionally, his love for Isabella was evident. He kept a nursery in his own home, stocked with everything she might need. Gradually, Charlotte softened, recognizing that fatherhood had opened a corner of Joe's heart she had never fully seen. Though the damage to their marriage was irreparable, the gift of a child offered them both a chance to cultivate a different kind of family dynamic, respectful, if not affectionate. Occasionally, Charlotte would hear rumors about Georgina's whereabouts. One tidbit placed her in a luxury rehab facility in Malibu, dealing with reported exhaustion and mental health issues. Another gossip column suggested she was attempting to write a tell-all book about her experiences with high-profile men. Charlotte rarely paid such rumors any mind. She had won her own battle, her dignity and her child's future were secure. One day, Charlotte stumbled upon an old photograph from the ill-fated Gala, capturing Georgina mid-sneer as she directed a mocking jibe at Charlotte's pregnant form. For a moment, Charlotte felt anger resurfacing. Then she looked down at Isabella, peacefully napping in her bassinet, and let out a quiet sigh. Georgina was a relic of the past, a symbol of betrayal. Charlotte had moved on, had grown, and ultimately triumphed. No further vengeance or bitterness was necessary. Life took on a semblance of normalcy. Charlotte's business thrived as her designs caught the eye of affluent clients seeking tasteful, understated luxury. She also began a YouTube channel showcasing home design tips and do-it-yourself ideas for mothers on a budget wanting to break the myth that style was only for the wealthy. Her authenticity and expertise quickly garnered a loyal following. Isabella grew rapidly, babbling her first words and taking tentative steps across the living room floor. Each milestone brought Charlotte an indescribable joy. She documented these moments in a private scrapbook, a cherished keepsake of their mother-daughter journey. Some nights, she would gently place Isabella in her crib, recalling the day she stood before the world at a charity gala, pregnant and humiliated, but ultimately triumphant. It felt like a lifetime ago. Nearly a year after the gala, Charlotte found herself at a charity function, this time for a pediatric hospital wing funded by the Chadwick Foundation. She had been invited due to her design contributions for the children's play area. While she initially hesitated, she decided to attend. She wanted to show that she bore no ill will toward philanthropic causes themselves, and also to demonstrate her resilience. The event was smaller, more understated, focused on the patients and doctors rather than extravagant displays of wealth. Joe was there, cutting the ribbon with a local politician. He spotted Charlotte in the crowd and offered a small smile, a nod of recognition. She nodded back. The cameras didn't swarm them this time. The tabloids had moved on to fresher scandals. After the ceremony, Joe approached her to thank her for her design work. Their conversation was brief but respectful, a far cry from the explosive confrontation a year earlier. That evening, as Charlotte returned home, she reflected on how much had changed. She was no longer the timid wife overshadowed by her husband's ambitions. She was a mother, a professional, and a woman who had reclaimed her identity. She had faced betrayal and public humiliation, but emerged stronger, with her self-worth intact. Joe, in his own way, seemed to be on a path of self-reflection. Whether that led to genuine personal growth or just another layer of pretense, Charlotte couldn't say. She found she no longer needed that answer. Her life's anchor was now Isabella, and nothing could undermine the happiness she cultivated for them both. The world. Charlotte had known the one of red carpets, whispered betrayals, and staged smiles was behind her now, and in its place stood something simpler, softer, and far more real. It began with curiosity, not commitment. Months after the birth of Isabella and the public unraveling of her marriage, Charlotte found herself ready to smile again. Not performatively, not politely, but truly. Her days were filled with lullabies, morning sunlight on the nursery walls, and client consultations that reignited her passion for design. Her townhouse, modest compared to the Chadwick penthouse, was filled with warmth, color, and the quiet hum of new beginnings. That's when she met Daniel. He wasn't part of the society circuit or the corporate elite. He was a freelance photojournalist who had spent years traveling through refugee camps, documenting stories that rarely made headlines. They met at a small gallery. Opening Charlotte was consulting on the space's lighting layout. Daniel had 3 photographs in the exhibit. Their conversation began over a shared admiration for vintage Polaroid tones, and turned into coffee, then phone calls, then long walks pushing Isabella's stroller through the West Village. Charlotte was cautious. She told Daniel everything: the scandal, the divorce, the media circus. He didn't flinch. "Everyone's carrying a past," he said once. "I'm more interested in how people carry it than in the weight itself." That stayed with her. What drew her to Daniel wasn't grand gestures, it was his gentleness. He never tried to replace what she had lost, never pushed her to move faster than she was ready for. He respected her boundaries. And when he looked at Isabella, it was with genuine affection, not obligation. He brought her small trinkets from his travels, tiny carved animals, colorful scarves, a harmonica that made the baby giggle uncontrollably. Their relationship unfolded like a sunrise, slow, patient, illuminating 1 inch of sky at a time. One weekend, as Daniel and Charlotte picnicked in the park with Isabella gurgling on a blanket between them, Charlotte caught herself laughingly laughing. She looked over at Daniel, who was tossing breadcrumbs to nearby birds with one hand and bouncing Isabella with the other, and she felt it a quiet joy she hadn't known she missed. It wasn't just about romance. It was about safety, ease, a reminder that love didn't have to come wrapped in wealth or tied to legacy. It could bloom quietly, rooted in shared moments and mutual respect. Charlotte didn't know what the future held. She wasn't rushing to define it. But for the first time in a long while, she wasn't bracing for collapse. She was letting herself hope. And in that hope, her life began again. The morning sun filtered softly through the tall windows of Charlotte's townhouse, casting a golden hue across the nursery floor. The room was filled with gentle signs of life: a half-folded blanket, a picture book lying open beside a stuffed elephant, and in the crib, the gentle rise and fall of little Isabella's chest as she slept peacefully. Charlotte stood silently by the window, a cup of tea in her hand, her gaze not on the city below, but on the reflection in the glass of a woman she no longer fully recognized, yet had come to deeply respect. A year ago, her name had been splashed across headlines linked to a scandal that felt like the unraveling of everything she had built. Mistress mocked the pregnant wife at a charity gala. The millionaire was served divorce papers on stage. The world had watched, judged, speculated. For days, even weeks, her life wasn't hers. But now, as dawn wrapped around her like a soft shawl, she saw it differently. That night, painful and humiliating as it had become the moment she stopped shrinking and started standing. It had been her breaking point, but also her beginning. She turned from the window and walked to Isabella's crib, brushing a soft strand of hair from her daughter's forehead. The baby sighed in her sleep, curling slightly toward the warmth of her mother's touch. That simple gesture stirred something deep within Charlotte. It wasn't bitterness, it was clarity. She no longer thought of Georgina, the woman who had once sneered at her belly in public. Nor did she dwell on Joe's betrayal. Those memories had been processed, filed, and placed where they belonged in the past. Their presence no longer had the power to break her. What filled her now was something entirely new: peace, purpose, and the quiet thrill of a life reclaimed on her own terms. Her business was thriving. Her YouTube channel, once a hesitant idea born in the stillness of heartbreak, had found its voice. And more than anything, her home now echoed with love, laughter, and the steady rhythm of a mother and daughter learning the world together. Some might still call what happened to her a scandal. Others might forever link her name to a public takedown. But Charlotte knew better. It wasn't a scandal, it was a rebirth. She pressed a kiss to Isabella's forehead and whispered, "We made it." And in that simple truth, she found everything she ever needed to know. Thank you for joining me on this emotional roller coaster of love, betrayal, and ultimate triumph. Charlotte's story reminds us that even in the darkest moments, when a pregnant wife is mocked in front of high society and a millionaire husband's betrayal plays out on the biggest stage, courage can shine through. She transformed heartbreak into empowerment and emerged stronger than ever, not only for herself, but for her child's future.
A man at the pinnacle of wealth and power, a wife at home, carrying his child, and a glamorous mistress stealing the spotlight. But what happens when greed and betrayal collide at the very moment new life is meant to be celebrated? In a shocking twist that rocked high society circles, billionaire mogul Victor Harrington chose to whisk his mistress away on a secret baby moon, leaving his pregnant wife, Eleanor, behind. Little did he know that one impulsive decision would unravel a carefully built empire overnight. Brace yourself for a tale of lavish lifestyles, boardroom betrayals, and one pregnant woman's brilliant revenge. Victor Harrington was the kind of man who seemed destined for opulence from birth. Born into a wealthy family in Greenwich, Connecticut, he'd possessed an effortless charm and ambition that made him a force to be reckoned with even before he earned his MBA from Harvard Business School. People close to him said he was unstoppable, a man with the cunning of a Wall Street wolf and the charm of a Hollywood star. He had cut deals in the early days. Alongside mentors who boasted legendary names, he once studied an investment portfolio under Warren Buffett's guidance at a Berkshire Hathaway internship, followed by an immersive executive program at Tesla University, where he brushed shoulders with Elon Musk. By the time he was 30, he had built Harrington Industries into a multi-million-dollar enterprise. By the time he was 40, he was on the prestigious Forbes billionaires list. Eleanor Davenport, soon to be Eleanor Harrington, first met Victor at a charity gala in Manhattan. Although her family was old money, they didn't flaunt it as visibly as the nouveau riche. She was a rising star in the philanthropic world, championing social justice causes, and her quiet grace drew Victor toward her like a magnet. The marriage was a match that made the front page of society magazines, promising to unite two powerful families in a union of wealth, influence, and mutual respect. For a long while, their life was the epitome of gilded harmony. They graced galas, inaugurated libraries, shook hands with political leaders, and jetted off to the French Riviera for impromptu vacations. Their future shone as bright as the diamond on Eleanor's left hand. But even the sturdiest empires can hide cracks. Unbeknownst to Eleanor, cracks were forming behind the scenes at Harrington Industries. Victor had an undeniable appetite for success, for excitement, and for women. When he met Bianca Suarez at a high-level conference in Dubai, it started as an innocent flirtation. She was an emerging media consultant, with her own brand of allure, mysterious, witty, and dangerously ambitious. If anyone had told Victor he was playing with fire, he would have laughed it off. After all, he was Victor Harrington, untouchable, unstoppable. But sometimes the most disastrous events start with just a spark. Over months, lunches turned into dinners, and dinners turned into clandestine weekends in exclusive resorts. Bianca introduced him to the kind of escapades he'd never even allowed himself to dream about before. While Eleanor was 3 months pregnant, carefully nurturing the next heir to the Harrington fortune, Victor found himself dancing intimately with his mistress under the shimmering skyline of Dubai, uncertain whether the rapid beating of his heart was excitement or guilt. Bianca didn't want to be a mere fling. She was calculated. She saw in Victor a chance to climb the social and financial ladder faster than any route she had previously considered. And so she stoked his ego, commiserated with his frustrations, and dangled the promise of secret passions whenever he seemed restless. If it was money and influence she wanted, Victor was more than willing to shower her with lavish gifts. To him, money was just a resource expendable and easily replenished. At first, he believed he could keep this double life separate from the pristine marriage he had built with Eleanor. His logic was twisted, but clear to him. His wife was his anchor, his old money confidant, who maintained his impeccable social standing. The mistress was a wild indulgence. He could afford a carefully contained adventure. He had no intention of hurting Eleanor, or so he told himself. Unfortunately for Victor, the threads keeping this secret under wraps were about to fray. A confidential tip circulated in the narrow corridors of Manhattan's wealthiest cliques. A society blogger posted an unconfirmed rumor about Victor seen dining with a mysterious brunette at a private suite in the Four Seasons Hotel. Most shrugged it off as an everyday hazard of being rich and famous. False rumors swirl constantly around the extremely wealthy. But there was more to this rumor than idle chatter. For the moment, Victor thought he had it all under control. He was a master juggler, wasn't he? Everything would remain neatly balanced, until it all came crashing down. As Eleanor's belly swelled with the promise of motherhood, her doctors advised a tranquil holiday to alleviate stress and welcome a sense of peace before the baby arrived. Friends whispered about the latest trend, a baby moon, a final romantic getaway for expecting couples. Eleanor secretly hoped Victor would take her somewhere calm, maybe a resort in the Maldives or a private villa in the Amalfi Coast. The dream of strolling white sandy beaches, holding Victor's hand, and relishing in the final moments of pregnancy, bliss danced in her mind. Victor, however, had a different plan entirely, a plan that was breathtakingly audacious and heartless. He decided to treat Bianca to a baby moon instead, using the ruse of an urgent business summit in Bali. For Victor, it was the ultimate indulgence, combine business with pleasure, while his wife rested at home, unaware that her husband was on the other side of the world, sipping cocktails by a turquoise infinity pool with another woman. He arranged it meticulously. He told Eleanor he was swamped with a high-stakes negotiation in Southeast Asia. Supposedly, several billionaire investors, including a silent partner, rumored to be connected with Bernard Arnault's luxury empire, had demanded an in-person meeting to finalize a partnership. The clock was ticking, he claimed. If he didn't fly out immediately, Harrington Industries risked missing a multi-billion-dollar opportunity. Concerned and weary, Eleanor kissed him goodbye, placing her hand gently over her baby bump and whispering, "Please come home safe." Half a globe away, Victor's private jet landed under the scorching Balinese sun. Bianca, exuding confidence in a linen sundress and designer sunglasses, looked every bit the radiant vacationer. It was a world apart from Eleanor's subdued maternity style back in New York. They settled into an exclusive luxury resort, one that boasted private villas ensconced amid lush tropical forests and infinity pools that seemed to spill into the horizon. To Victor, the staff was discreet, the views unparalleled, and the exclusivity absolute, the perfect setting for a forbidden escapade. But even in paradise, there were signs that things could go wrong. Rumors had circulated that a well-known Hollywood actress was staying at the resort. The paparazzi lurking outside with long-lens cameras were determined to snag any sensational shot. Victor, in his arrogance, paid them no mind. He was too busy enjoying lavish seafood dinners, couples spa treatments, and romantic beachside strolls with Bianca. He reasoned that even if a photograph leaked, he had enough influence to squash it. Money talks, and hush money screams, as he liked to say. What he didn't anticipate was that a local journalist working part-time as a bartender recognized him immediately. The journalist, named Ayu Priyanka, was a savvy freelance reporter. She knew the difference between professional business summit behavior and lovers on a secret holiday. Intrigued, she discreetly snapped a few photographs with her phone, capturing Victor and Bianca laughing over a candle-lit dinner. At first, Ayu weighed the potential consequences. Could these pictures be valuable enough to lead to a groundbreaking story in an international tabloid? Possibly. But first, she needed more solid proof, a narrative that went beyond just two people enjoying a vacation. While Victor reveled in the illusions of a perfect getaway, Eleanor was left to manage her pregnancy in New York, dealing with morning sickness doctor's appointments, and the creeping suspicion that her husband's voice over the phone sounded distant, disconnected. She found herself lying awake at night, staring at the vaulted ceiling of their penthouse, feeling a cold emptiness in their once warm bed. Something was terribly off, but she couldn't pinpoint exactly what. Her mother, Cecilia Davenport, urged her to rest and trust in Victor's dedication to their growing family. After all, he was a busy billionaire. He had always been a bit distant when major deals were on the line. The seeds of betrayal had been planted. If Victor had known the destructive potential of this trip, he might have turned the jet around before it even left the tarmac in New York. But he was blinded by Bianca's enchantments and his own audacity. Each day in Bali heightened his recklessness. He even posted a cryptic Instagram photo of palm trees and a hidden silhouette, an attempt at being clever. Inadvertently, that single post gave watchers enough clues to confirm his exact location. The stage was set for a grand reveal. The baby moon that should have belonged to Eleanor was turning into a ticking time bomb. Sooner or later, a photo or rumor would slip through the cracks, and the moment it did, it would detonate, not just Victor's marriage, but potentially the entire foundation of Harrington Industries. In the days following Victor's departure, Eleanor tried to distract herself with philanthropic work. She immersed herself in a high-profile hospital fundraiser hosted at the New York Public Library, the same halls once graced by the likes of Michael Bloomberg and philanthropic luminaries from across the nation. Yet even as she stood at the podium, acknowledging donations and delivering heartfelt speeches, an unsettling feeling gnawed at her. It was during one of these fundraisers that Eleanor bumped into her old friend, Serena Marshall, a well-connected socialite and gossip connoisseur. They embraced warmly, then retreated to a corner table where Serena's voice dropped to a whisper. "Ellie, dear, have you heard anything odd about Victor lately?" Eleanor bristled at the tone, feeling a pang of unease. She mustered a soft laugh, trying to brush off any concerns. "Funny you should ask," Eleanor replied. "He's in Bali, urgent business. Hasn't been easy on me, but you know how these deals are." Serena looked at her sympathetically, but her eyes flashed with alarm. She leaned in closer, lowering her voice further. "I heard something from a contact in Singapore. Someone said they saw Victor with a woman named Bianca Suarez, apparently a rising star in media consulting. And they weren't exactly at a boardroom table." Eleanor's heart lurched. She struggled to maintain her composure, her mind racing with possibilities. Could this be a misunderstanding? A smear attempt by a competitor? She had known Victor for years, had believed in his loyalty, though she was aware of his love for excitement. She forced a polite smile, dismissing the rumors. "I'm sure it's some confusion. You know how gossip can get twisted." Serena nodded, but the shadow in her eyes spoke volumes. "Just keep your eyes open, Ellie. If you need help, you know where to find me." That night, alone in her penthouse, Eleanor found her thoughts spiraling. She recalled the nights Victor had come home, late, the hush-hush phone calls, the vague business dinners. She scrolled through social media, scanning for clues, anything to confirm or debunk the rumors. Eventually, she stumbled upon Victor's cryptic Instagram post, palm trees in the background, a silhouette that looked suspiciously feminine. A flood of emotions overtook her. She ran to the bathroom, tears mixing with waves of nausea from her pregnancy. The baby felt her turmoil kicking inside her womb, a reminder of why she had to maintain her composure. Meanwhile, half a world away, Victor's lavish romance continued unabated. He lounged with Bianca in a cabana overlooking the ocean. They talked about launching new philanthropic initiatives, ironically enough, under Bianca's name, funded by Victor's bottomless resources. Bianca was adept at shaping narratives guiding Victor's public image. "Picture this," she said, leaning forward with sparkling eyes. "We frame you as a forward-thinking businessman who invests in youth-oriented media projects across Asia. You'll expand your market reach and look good doing it. I can even help you with the contacts and PR." Victor, enthralled, listened intently. He considered Bianca not just a lover, but a strategic mind who understood branding in a way that could amplify Harrington Industries' global presence. In his mind, he was weaving a dream, a future where he could maintain a public marriage with Eleanor, keep control of his empire, and quietly enjoy a partnership with Bianca that would catapult them both to unprecedented heights. But the cracks in that dream were starting to show. On the third day of their business trip, Victor received a text from one of his board members, Jackson Wolfe, an old friend who had initially introduced him to some of his earliest investors. The text was direct: "Call me. Urgent. Concern about rumors." Victor paled as he read the message. Could it be? But he shrugged it off. Board members worry about everything from stock fluctuation to media gossip. Still, the knot in his stomach tightened. Jackson, however, knew something that Victor didn't. News was spreading in hush-hush financial circles that the Harrington brand was vulnerable. Pioneering investors disliked uncertainty. If the rumors of Victor's scandal went public, it could undermine negotiations, spook shareholders, and create chaos. Handle it before it blows up, Jackson's text concluded. Yet even that warning didn't shake Victor enough to abandon his tryst. He rationalized that he would handle the fallout once he returned to New York. He was Victor Harrington, after all, a man who had charmed senators out, negotiated cunning tycoons, and turned entire markets on their heads with a single announcement. A rumor or two wouldn't bring him down. Across the ocean, Eleanor was wrestling with growing doubts. She paced the penthouse, replaying every suspicious detail of the past months. Could Victor really be that brazen to take another woman on the very trip meant for them? She didn't want to believe it, but the evidence was mounting. She decided to call an old college acquaintance, Damien Cho, a private investigator who specialized in high-profile cases. "Damien," she began, her voice trembling, I need you to look into something." Discreetly. Eleanor's resolution to seek the truth was the first step toward unraveling Victor's carefully woven tapestry of lies. But it wouldn't stop there. Even she didn't realize yet that once she discovered what was truly happening, her response would be nothing short of a coup, one that would leave Victor's empire trembling at her feet. Damien Cho worked fast. He was an expert in navigating the hidden underbelly of high society scandals. Having once been hired to investigate the suspicious affairs of an actual European prince, this job was par for the course, but it carried a personal element. He knew Eleanor from her days volunteering at a local community center. He respected her warmth, her dedication. And so, when Eleanor asked for his help, he pledged to handle the matter personally. He first followed the breadcrumbs online, examining social media check-ins, cross-referencing flight logs from Teterboro Airport, where Victor often chartered private jets, combing through paparazzi shots of Indonesian resorts. It didn't take long to connect the dots. Damien discreetly messaged contacts in Bali, among them a local stringer for an American tabloid who confirmed that a wealthy American named Victor Harrington had been spotted with a woman who was decidedly not pregnant. As the puzzle pieces fell into place, Damien's chest tightened with an uneasy sense of foreboding. This wasn't just a case of a random affair. The stakes were colossal. The Harrington name carried weight in corporate boardrooms across the globe, and any scandal could rock markets and ripple through philanthropic circles. The next step was deciding how to deliver the news to Eleanor without breaking her heart entirely. Meanwhile, Eleanor found daily life increasingly difficult. She attended obstetric appointments alone, feigning a smile when the doctor asked about Victor's whereabouts. Her mother noticed the change in her demeanor. "Ellie, darling, you look so tired. Is everything all right?" Eleanor shook her head, tears forming at the corners of her eyes. "I just need some rest, Mum. I'll be okay." But the moment Cecilia left, Eleanor gave in to sobs, tears that combined heartbreak with a fierce determination. She had a baby to protect, and she would not allow uncertainty to linger. When Damien finally presented his findings, documented photos, flight logs, even a snippet of a conversation recorded by a local resort worker, Eleanor felt both devastation and a strange, cold clarity. She stared at the evidence in stony silence. The man she loved, the father of her unborn child, had chosen to spend precious days in paradise with another woman, parading their affair so openly that it had already begun to leak in social circles. But heartbreak wasn't the only emotion coursing through Eleanor. A sense of betrayal so profound that it threatened to consume her was tempered by the resilience her family had instilled in her. The Davenport lineage was filled with strong, sharp-witted individuals, some who had weathered financial crises, others who had surmounted personal tragedies. Eleanor carried that legacy in her veins. If Victor wanted to toy with her trust, she would answer in a way that made him regret underestimating her. She quietly called her personal attorney, Simone Gold, a formidable woman with an impeccable track record in corporate law. Simone, Eleanor said softly, "I need to talk about my shares in Harrington Industries and what I might do with them if circumstances change." That phone call set off a chain of events that would reshape the corporate landscape of Harrington Industries. In an ironclad prenuptial agreement, a document Victor insisted on, there was a clause that ironically granted Eleanor a significant stake in the company if Victor ever breached certain moral turpitude conditions. At the time, neither had expected it to be relevant. After all, it was standard protective language in high society marriages to discourage reckless behavior. Now that clause became Eleanor's key to a possible coup. Late one evening, Eleanor sat with Simone in a private library. The scene was fit for a secret conspiracy. Thick velvet drapes, mahogany tables, the faint glow of a Tiffany lamp, illuminating piles of legal documents. "We have everything we need if you choose to proceed," Simone stated calmly. "You can call for a vote of no confidence, leveraging your shares, and then move to replace Victor as CEO if you prove a serious breach of conduct that jeopardizes the company." Eleanor closed her eyes, exhaling a shaky breath. He's not just a cheating husband. He's risking the company's reputation. Investors talk. Stocks drop at the mere hint of scandal. The board might push him out to save their own skins. "I just never thought I'd be the one orchestrating this." Simone placed a reassuring hand on Eleanor's. "From my experience, betrayal often forces us into decisions we never thought we'd make. But the best decisions are those made from strength, not spite." Meanwhile, across the world, Victor was blissfully unaware of the legal storm brewing in New York. His only concern was how to spin the rumors swirling around the resort. Bianca, too, was confident. Over dinner one night, she reassured him. "We can craft a PR statement that says you were networking with me for a series of upcoming deals in Southeast Asia. Bring up philanthropic collaborations in local communities, nobody will suspect a thing." Victor nodded in agreement, grateful for her cunning. It never crossed his mind that back home a pregnant Eleanor was on the brink of executing a swift and devastating plan. Simone's phone calls to board members had already begun under the guise of friendly check-ins. She was gathering allies, stoking concerns about Victor's reliability. The board, always protective of its bottom line, listened closely. After all, a scandal at the top could mean bad press, falling stock, or worse. Piece by piece, Eleanor's revolt was forming. She was no longer the timid, heartbroken wife. She was a future mother who refused to let her child inherit the aftermath of a father's betrayal. If Victor wasn't going to be a responsible partner, she would ensure he couldn't take the company down with him. In less than a week, the stage would be set for an explosive board meeting, one that would pit Eleanor's quiet determination against Victor's flamboyant arrogance. Victor returned to New York in a flurry of self-assured triumph, convinced that he had contained any rumors about his secret affair with Bianca. He strolled into his penthouse, expecting to find Eleanor in a subdued but loving mood. Instead, the apartment was cool-hushed. Even the staff seemed unusually tense. Eleanor was sitting in the living room, sipping tea, her eyes distant. The subtle tension in the air pricked at Victor's confidence, but he masked it with a charming grin. "Darling, I'm home," he announced, setting down his luggage. He reached out to kiss her cheek, but she recoiled, her expression revealing the silent storm within. "Where were you, really?" she asked softly, the tremble in her voice betraying her hurt. For a moment, Victor froze his mind, whirling with excuses. I told you he began forcing composure negotiations in Bali. It was stressful, but stressful, Eleanor interrupted. Her voice rose slightly. Look at me, Victor. She stood, revealing her swollen belly. I'm the one who's pregnant with your child alone while you were off entertaining your mistress. Her words reverberated in the elegant living room, echoing amid the hush of the staff. Victor's eyes flickered with panic. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Eleanor, we shouldn't do this in front of... She cut him off again, the tears in her eyes reflecting both pain and fury. We shouldn't do this at all, but you left me no choice. With trembling hands, she gathered her coat and purse. I'll be at my mother's. My attorney will be in touch. Victor felt the world tilt beneath him. Eleanor, wait. We can talk this through. You know I know everything, she hissed, her voice cold as steel. With that, she turned on her heel and walked out, accompanied by 2 discreet bodyguards her mother had insisted she employ. The slamming door reverberated, leaving Victor in a stunned silence that belied the magnitude of the unfolding crisis. The next few days passed in a blur of chaos for Victor. He frantically texted and called Eleanor, but her responses were minimal formal. She refused to meet alone. Then came the calls from the Harrington Industries board members. A special board meeting had been scheduled for the following week. The stated reason, urgent discussions regarding leadership and corporate strategy. The tone of the calls made Victor's stomach drop. There was no cordial small talk, no easy banter. These were men and women who smelled blood in the water. Desperate Victor reached out to Bianca for comfort. But even she sensed the shifting currents. We need a plan, she told him, her face pale with concern, during a hushed dinner in a secluded Michelin star restaurant. You have to get ahead of this. Frame your trip as purely business. Remind them how indispensable you are. Show them your next big project is about to roll out. She offered him PR angles, preparing to rally her media contacts. Yet even Bianca's cunning felt insufficient against the tidal wave Eleanor had set in motion. Behind closed doors, Simone Gold was meeting with Harrington board members, presenting them evidence of Victor's risky behavior and how it jeopardized the company's reputation and future prospects. She skillfully outlined the moral turpitude clause and how it could be invoked to remove him. Meanwhile, Eleanor, hidden away at her mother's estate, tried to steady her emotions and maintain her health for the baby. She found solace in daily visits to her favorite greenhouse on the property, letting the scent of fresh blooms and the vibrancy of life remind her why she was fighting this battle so fiercely. Perhaps the most decisive ally Eleanor gained was Jackson Wolfe, the board member who'd been Victor's close friend. As the scandal threatened to burst into public view, Jackson too found himself cornered by anxious stakeholders and even the press. He'd always admired Victor's brilliance, but he couldn't deny the volatility that was now overshadowing the CEO's leadership. When Eleanor approached him with a personal appeal, asking him to place the company's welfare first, Jackson felt the weight of responsibility. After all, an empire like Harrington Industries didn't revolve around just one man. It had thousands of employees, global partners, and philanthropic obligations. A meltdown at the top could hurt them all. The tension escalated as tabloids began printing speculative articles about Victor's affair. Photos from Bali surfaced online, showing a man who looked suspiciously like Victor Harrington in an intimate embrace with a mystery woman. An onlooker claimed they overheard staff whispering Bianca's name. While some media outlets remained cautious, calling the pictures inconclusive, the digital sphere teemed with rumors. Social media users shared side-by-side comparisons of the man in Bali with official photos of Victor. The avalanche had begun. In an emergency PR move, Victor released a statement through Harrington Industries claiming he had been inspecting potential sites for philanthropic work and that Ms. Bianca Suarez was a consultant assisting in negotiations with local community leaders. The statement was riddled with corporate jargon, and critics pounced on it as an evasive half-truth. The board meeting date approached ominously. Investors whispered about the potential for a shift in leadership. Analysts on financial channels debated the seriousness of the scandal's impact. Share prices wavered slightly, but enough to create nervous chatter. All the while, Victor felt increasingly trapped, his once indomitable confidence shaken to the core. Somewhere behind the scenes, Eleanor steeled herself. She placed a hand on her baby bump, remembering why she needed to see this through. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about securing a future for her child, free from the looming shadow of a father who believed he could treat people as pawns in his personal game. She wanted to protect the legacy that her baby would one day inherit, ensuring it wasn't poisoned by Victor's self-serving choices. When the morning of the board meeting finally arrived, Manhattan buzzed with anticipation. Black SUVs lined up outside Harrington Tower. News vans prowled the streets, hoping for a glimpse of either Victor or Eleanor. Inside the building's executive conference room, the fate of one of the city's most powerful men hung in the balance. And unbeknownst to Victor, Eleanor had spent countless hours meticulously preparing for this moment. On an unseasonably cold spring morning, the towering glass facade of Harrington Tower reflected a bleak, steel-gray sky. Inside the executive conference room on the 59th floor, a series of tense discussions filled the air. Board members took their seats around a polished mahogany table. At the head sat an imposing leather chair reserved for the CEO, a seat that Victor Harrington assumed was unequivocally his. But as the clock neared 9 a.m., the tension in the room crackled with electric intensity. Victor entered shoulders-squared hair, meticulously styled, wearing a custom-tailored suit. He exuded the aura of a man used to control, but a subtle flicker in his eyes betrayed uncertainty. Next to him walked Bianca, meticulously groomed in a business outfit, ready to spin narratives. Her presence alone raised eyebrows. Traditionally, only top executives or board-invited advisors attended these pivotal meetings. Bianca, however, was neither. Whispers erupted as board members exchanged curious looks. At precisely 9 a.m., the doors swung open again. Eleanor stepped inside, supported by her attorney, Simone Gold. Wearing a subdued black dress that discreetly draped her pregnant figure, she moved with quiet, composed determination. A hush fell over the room. Heads turned, and even Victor's practiced poise faltered for an instant. This was the first time he'd seen his wife since she had walked out of the penthouse. She acknowledged the board members with a polite nod, her gaze not lingering too long on Victor. No one missed the significance of her presence, especially because she was still a major shareholder with seats on the board that her Davenport family connections had secured. Simone took a seat beside Eleanor, placing a leather briefcase on the table, the metal clasps glinting under fluorescent lights. The board chair, an elderly statesman named Arthur Norwood, cleared his throat. "Thank you all for attending this extraordinary session. We have urgent matters to discuss regarding Harrington Industries' leadership vision and recent developments in the public sphere." His gaze darted from Victor to Eleanor and back again. "This is a confidential meeting, so I expect the utmost discretion." Victor tried to seize the initiative. Standing, he projected his confident, booming voice. "Before we begin, let me address the swirling rumors. There have been malicious reports in the press about my personal life. I want to assure everyone here that these allegations are blown out of proportion. My trip to Bali was primarily for philanthropic site inspections and negotiations with prospective investors. He gestured toward Bianca. Ms. Suarez has been an instrumental media consultant, helping me navigate international expansions and philanthropic strategies. Bianca stepped forward, her tone crisp and professional. I understand the concerns, but I assure you, my partnership with Mr. Harrington is strictly business. We've been discussing a large-scale youth media initiative. Eleanor, calm, yet resolute, interrupted. That's enough. She rose slowly, one hand resting protectively on her belly. Her voice was steady, resonant with an inner strength. We're all aware of the photographic evidence. We know the media stories aren't mere fabrications, but the real issue here isn't just a personal indiscretion. It's the risk posed to this company, our company, by this scandal. She glanced around the table, meeting each board member's gaze. I have proof of how negotiations with certain Asian partners have been compromised by the negative press. Investor confidence is wavering. And this is on top of the moral turpitude clause in Victor's contract. A stunned silence followed. Moral turpitude clauses were rarely mentioned in corporate contexts, but in high-profile marriages that intersected with business holdings, they were sometimes used to protect the company from the detrimental actions of a key figure. Victor's face paled momentarily. He cast a sharp look at Simone, recalling the prenuptial agreement's fine print that he once dismissed as boilerplate. She returned his stare with icy composure. Arthur Norwood cleared his throat again. Mrs. Harrington, can you elaborate on the severity of these repercussions? Simone clicked open her briefcase and pulled out neatly organized documents. Board members here, you'll find data illustrating recent dips in stock value following the Bali scandal leaks. This is paired with the explicit language in the moral turpitude clause that Mr. Harrington personally signed. If certain actions, infidelity-damaging public scandals, put the company at risk, shareholders have the right to demand a revaluation of leadership. Victor jumped to his feet, voice trembling with a mixture of anger and fear. This is outrageous. You're using our personal issues to stage a corporate coup. You can't do this. Jackson Wolfe spoke up, surprising Victor with the quiet resolve in his voice. Victor, your name may be on the building, but you're not the sole owner. We all have to safeguard Harrington Industries. The press is already circling. If we lose key investors because of your personal mistakes, thousands of jobs could be at risk, not to mention our philanthropic commitments. He paused, avoiding Victor's gaze. I'm sorry, old friend, but business is business. The tension reached a fever pitch as a motion was placed on the table. Eleanor, supported by her block of shares and quietly backed by the Davenport family's significant influence, made a formal request for a vote of no confidence in Victor Harrington as CEO. Typically, such measures took weeks to arrange. But the moral turpitude clause, combined with the urgent crisis, allowed an immediate consideration. It was unprecedented, but legal. Victor and Bianca watched in mounting horror as the votes were cast. Old alliances turned shaky. Some board members, who once owed their positions to Victor, now weighed their own survival. The result wasn't even close. A majority sided with Eleanor and Simone's proposal. The motion carried, effectively ousting Victor from the CEO position pending further negotiations regarding his stake and role in the company. Eleanor looked across the table, her eyes moist with a blend of triumph and heartbreak. Victor, I never wanted it to come to this, she said quietly, but you forced my hand. Stunned into silence, Victor sank into his chair. Bianca tried to speak, to offer a rebuttal or spin, but her words faltered in the face of the board's overwhelming consensus. The meeting concluded with a swirl of legal procedures. A caretaker CEO would be appointed, with an emergency leadership council to manage day-to-day operations, while a permanent replacement was sought. For all intents and purposes, Victor's reign was over. As people gathered their folders and prepared to leave, an ominous hush filled the room. The downfall of a once mighty empire head had played out in a mere hour. Eleanor, gathering her strength, exited without another word, Simone at her side. In the hallway, the press buzzed, cameras flashing. But Eleanor walked past them, a silent force of composure, stepping into a waiting car that whisked her away. Inside that car, she finally allowed herself to exhale. She gently placed both hands on her belly, feeling the baby's light kick. A swirl of conflicting emotions flooded her: sorrow, relief, fury, and the faint hope that maybe now the child she carried could one day grow into a legacy untainted by reckless betrayal. Victor had taken a mistress on a baby moon that should have been theirs, but in that betrayal, he had also handed Eleanor the keys to the kingdom. The world of high finance reacted swiftly to the seismic shift at Harrington Industries. Within hours, the news had spread, from private trading floors in Hong Kong to business lunches in London. Major outlets like the Wall Street Journal and the Financial Times dedicated front-page headlines to Victor Harrington's sudden ouster, speculating on the behind-the-scenes drama that led to it. Business analysts on CNBC questioned whether Harrington Industries could maintain its momentum without the larger-than-life charisma of its founder. But in hushed corners of society events and exclusive clubs, the whispers focused on the scandal's personal dimension. Everyone knew that Victor had been unseated, not just by the board, but by the very wife he betrayed while she was pregnant with his child. The story was salacious enough to feed tabloids for weeks, but it also showcased Eleanor's business acumen and unyielding resolve. Where once people saw her as simply Victor's gracious spouse, they now recognized a formidable woman who had deftly used a moral turpitude clause to protect herself and the company. Victor retreated to a penthouse suite at the Carlisle Hotel, a discreet refuge for the city's affluent seeking privacy amid turmoil. His phone buzzed incessantly with calls from attorneys, PR managers, and concerned allies. But not all calls were sympathetic. Some were angry investors demanding explanations, and others were from tabloids offering extravagant sums for exclusive interviews. Victor ignored most of them, drowning his sorrows in half-empty whiskey glasses. Bianca hovered around him, attempting to console him. Yet her once firm confidence now wavered as she faced the repercussions of being publicly named as the Mistress. Gossip columns buzzed with her name, some labeling her a gold digger who had orchestrated the entire fiasco to boost her media profile. Even legitimate media platforms questioned her credentials, doubting her role as a bona fide consultant. The brand she'd painstakingly built threatened to crumble, and the high-profile connections she once courted grew wary of associating with scandal. She tried to assure Victor that they still had each other, and that it was only a matter of time before they bounced back. But in the pit of his despair, her words rang hollow. Meanwhile, behind the imposing walls of the Davenport estate, Eleanor found herself grappling with mixed emotions. She had succeeded in removing Victor from the company leadership, but the personal cost weighed heavily on her. She was married to a man whose betrayal had shattered her trust. For nights on end, she lay awake, feeling the baby's gentle movements and wondering what kind of future they would have. She consulted with Simone about legal separation, maybe even divorce, but each time she hesitated, mindful of the unborn child who would inevitably link her life to Victor's in some way. While Eleanor wrestled with internal conflicts, corporate maneuvers continued at Harrington Industries. The newly appointed caretaker CEO, Lawrence Porter, a veteran executive from within the company, diligently tried to stabilize investor sentiment. He reached out to longtime partners, reminding them of the company's resilient fundamentals and diversified portfolio. But the stock still dipped further, reflecting the market's anxiety. Even seasoned analysts couldn't discount the intangible influence Victor once held. Lawrence, however, had Eleanor's backing, and Jackson Wolfe's strategic insight. Their combined efforts formed a temporary shield against a total collapse in confidence. In an attempt to turn the tide, Simone advised Eleanor to take a more visible role. "You don't have to be CEO, but your presence will reassure investors," she said gently. "Host a small event. Show your commitment to the company. Let them see that the Harrington brand is intact, anchored by someone with integrity." Eleanor was reluctant, but she recognized the necessity. Against her natural inclination for privacy, she agreed to hold a press conference to address the company's future. Titled "A New Horizon for Harrington Industries," it was carefully orchestrated, tasteful floral arrangements, minimal fanfare, and a succinct message of stability, progress, and renewed commitment to philanthropy. Eleanor spoke for only 10 minutes, but her measured tone and composed demeanor impressed even the cynics. She reiterated the strength of the firm's core businesses and announced a series of philanthropic initiatives focusing on maternal health, an unsubtle nod to her own journey. By the end, the stock saw a modest uptick, a sign that perhaps the market believed Harrington Industries could weather the storm after all. Yet beneath the public facade of a carefully managed transition lay personal entanglements that were far from resolved. Victor watched Eleanor's press conference in his hotel suite, a feeling of muted awe stirring inside him. There she was, the woman he had wronged gracefully, commanding respect from an audience of seasoned journalists and business leaders. He couldn't help but feel a pang of regret, if not for his actions, then for his hubris that had led him here. One evening, as he swirled whiskey in a crystal tumbler, he found his thoughts drifting uncomfortably to the future. Would Eleanor proceed with a divorce? What about the baby? Would he have a place in his child's life? After everything that happened, he knew he had to attempt to fix things, at least in part. Taking a deep breath, he dialed Eleanor's number for the first time since the board meeting. The phone rang and rang until her voicemail picked up. Victor hesitated, then left a quiet message. "Eleanor, I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from, but we need to talk about everything, especially the baby. I'm sorry." He wasn't sure if he expected a reply, but he knew there was no easy path forward without at least confronting the reality of the child they both were responsible for. Outside the Carlyle's windows, the city glistened under a canopy of lights. For the first time in years, Victor Harrington, once the master of the universe, felt entirely unsure of what lay ahead. A week after the historic boardroom coup, Eleanor sat in her mother's sunlit conservatory. Hothouse orchids of every hue framed the glass walls, their vibrant blossoms reminding her that life continued to flourish even in the face of strife. She absent-mindedly rubbed her baby bump, reflecting on the swirl of events that had consumed her life. She was no longer just a wife. She was a major shareholder who had pulled the strings to unseat a billionaire mogul. Yet behind the newfound respect people afforded her lay an ache of betrayal that no corporate victory could mend. Her phone buzzed. Checking it, she found a message from Victor. "Please, let's talk. We owe it to ourselves and our child." Eleanor stared at the words, her heart pounding. After everything that had happened, could she face him? But she also knew that ignoring him forever wasn't an option. They had a child to consider, a future that demanded clarity, if not reconciliation. She typed a brief reply, "Tomorrow noon, the Davenport estate. Bring your attorney." It was a formal invitation, suggesting a calm, structured environment. If they were to negotiate the boundaries of their future, the setting would be one Eleanor controlled. Victor arrived the next day wearing a subdued suit that lacked his usual flashiness. Accompanying him was his personal lawyer, a soft-spoken man who looked uncomfortable from the moment they stepped onto the immaculately trimmed lawns. Eleanor greeted them in the estate's library, flanked by Simone Gold. Polite nods were exchanged, but the tension was palpable. "I appreciate you agreeing to meet, Victor," began clearing his throat. His voice was subdued, none of the brash confidence that once defined him. "I know I've caused you unbelievable pain, and I'm truly sorry. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want to ensure that I'm still part of our child's life." Eleanor studied him, trying to reconcile the man she'd once loved with the broken figure before her. "You made a choice, Victor, more than one choice over and over to lie to me. You destroyed the trust we had. But yes, you're still the father of this child." Her voice wavered slightly, but she pressed on. "I won't deny you the chance to be in our baby's life if you can prove you'll be a responsible parent." Simone nudged a folder across the polished table. "We have some proposed terms," she explained. "For co-parenting child support and possibly spousal support, should Eleanor decide to file for divorce. It's all preliminary, but it provides a framework." Victor shot a quick glance at his attorney, who nodded as he skimmed the documents. Before he could respond, Eleanor raised a hand. "But let's be clear. I expect honesty from here on out. Any more deceptions, financial or personal, and you'll lose access. Is that understood?" Swallowing hard, Victor nodded. "I understand." They navigated the intricacies of child support and visitation schedules with the same formality one would use to negotiate a business deal. Simone outlined how they'd handle expenses related to education, healthcare, and even a trust fund for the child's future. Despite the emotional undercurrent, the conversation remained measured, proving that both parties were resolute in doing what was best for the baby. Outside, the day had turned overcast, clouds gathering like silent witnesses to this fateful meeting. When all the legal points had been addressed, an uneasy silence fell. Victor turned to Eleanor, voice trembling with something akin to remorse. "I know a contract can't fix this, but maybe with time." Eleanor's expression was soft, yet cautious. "I don't know if we can rebuild trust, Victor. Right now, my focus is on our child and on stabilizing Harrington Industries. I won't forgive what you did, at least not yet. But for the baby's sake, I'm willing to keep the door to communication open." Victor sighed, relief and sorrow mingling in his eyes. "Thank you. That means more than you know." After they finished, Simone escorted Victor and his lawyer to the door. Eleanor stayed behind, still seated at the heavy wooden table. The moment the door clicked shut, she buried her face in her hands, a quiet sob breaking through the composure she'd clung to all afternoon. The meeting felt like the formal dissolution of the life she once cherished and the birth of a tentative new arrangement dictated by lawyers and heartbreak. Outside, Victor paused under the estate's grand archway, looking back at the stately manor. He felt an immense sense of loss, of Eleanor, of the carefree world he once believed was his by right. All that remained was the flicker of hope that he might still salvage some shred of dignity or at least fatherhood from the wreckage. As the sun began to set, both of them were left contemplating the precarious path ahead. For Eleanor, there was the daunting task of balancing her new role in the company impending motherhood and the emotional toll of Victor's betrayal. For Victor, a future unspooled that no longer revolved around his unchecked desires. The affair with Bianca had scorched the once verdant life he enjoyed, leaving him to rebuild on whatever scorched earth remained. And standing at the epicenter of it all was a child not yet born, but already shaping the decisions and destinies of the two people who had brought them into this world. 2 months after the boardroom coup, Harrington Industries began to steady under interim CEO Lawrence Porter and Eleanor's quiet but guiding influence. Investor confidence, once shaken, showed signs of recovery. Eleanor, though not officially at the helm, became the moral compass the company sorely needed. Her focus shifted toward green energy in Southeast Asia and philanthropic programs in education and maternal health causes that echoed her personal transformation. While the board rallied behind her strategic insights, Eleanor embraced the final stages of pregnancy in the comfort of the Davenport estate. She and her mother Cecilia carefully prepared the nursery. The estate, adorned with family portraits and fresh blooms, became a sanctuary of reflection and resolve. Eleanor found a strange comfort in her new dual identity, mother-to-be and corporate architect. Victor, meanwhile, lived in quiet exile at the Carlisle Hotel, a far cry from the boardroom he once ruled. He made half-hearted attempts to salvage his image, TV interviews, vague apologies, even an anonymous donation to one of Eleanor's maternal health projects. But the public had moved on. Bianca Suarez had all but disappeared, reportedly in Europe, rebranding her image. Their affair, once blazing with scandal, faded into footnotes in tabloids. Victor's fall was complete. His public charm now rang hollow in empty rooms, despite all he still hoped to be part of his unborn child's life. One evening, unable to bear the silence any longer, he left Eleanor a voicemail. "We need to talk. About the baby, I'm sorry." When Eleanor heard the message, she hesitated, but she knew this conversation was inevitable. Her reply was short and firm. "Tomorrow, noon. Here, bring your attorney." The next day, Victor arrived at the Davenport estate, subdued, accompanied by a lawyer who looked as uncomfortable as the situation warranted. In the library, Simone Gold stood by Eleanor's side, and together they laid out terms, co-parenting, financial responsibilities, and strict boundaries. "I won't deny you access," Eleanor said, her tone even. "But if there's any dishonesty, any more games, you'll lose that right." Victor nodded solemnly. "I understand." They negotiated like business partners rather than former lovers. Once the legal matters were handled, an awkward silence lingered. "Maybe," Victor said, voice low with time. "I'm not ready to talk about forgiveness," Eleanor replied, "but for our child's sake, I'll keep the door open." Weeks later, as autumn deepened, Eleanor went into labor earlier than expected. In the pre-dawn hours, amidst the sterile light of a hospital room, she gave birth to a baby boy. Tears filled her eyes as she held him. "Welcome to the world," she whispered, her voice breaking. Victor arrived hours later. She could have turned him away, but didn't. He entered quietly, awestruck by the sight of their son. "He's perfect," he murmured, his hands trembling as he cradled the child. Eleanor watched, uncertain but composed. Despite everything, their son deserved a future rooted in peace, not bitterness. That moment of shared awe, the only one since their world, fractured, offered a flicker of fragile possibility. The scandal had toppled a billionaire, empowered a betrayed woman and birthed a new legacy. In this dawn-lit hospital room, the next chapter was just beginning. Thank you for joining me on this tumultuous journey of passion, power, and redemption. From a secret Bali getaway that sparked rumors in the tabloids to a dramatic boardroom coup that shook Harrington Industries, we've witnessed how betrayal and ambition can unravel even the mightiest of empires. Yet in the end, we've also seen how strength, dignity, and a fierce sense of purpose can guide us through the darkest storms. Eleanor emerged not just as a scorned wife, but as a formidable force, one who safeguarded an entire company while preparing to welcome new life into the world. If you were swept up in the twists and turns of this real-life drama novel, please show your support. Like this video, share it with friends, and subscribe to our channel for more captivating stories. Your engagement helps us continue bringing you tales that inspire intrigue and entertain. Thank you for watching.